My name is Marlo Bennett. I'm 28 years old. And for a long time, I thought stability meant safety. I work as an IT consultant, the kind of job where things are always quietly on the edge of breaking, and people like me are paid to keep them from doing exactly that. I've always been good at it. Calm under pressure, organized, the person who doesn't panic when everyone else does. That role didn't stop at work. It followed me home. My boyfriend, now my ex, was a graphic designer. Creative, charming, the kind of man people liked almost instantly. We'd been together for 2 years, living in a cozy apartment in a mid-sized city. At least that's what I told myself we were building. Something steady, something real. From the beginning, I was all in. Not long after we started dating, he lost his job. Some freelance contracts dried up overnight. He tried to laugh it off at first, said it was temporary, said he'd bounce back quickly. But the weeks stretched into months, and the stress settled into our apartment like a permanent guest. I didn't hesitate. I covered the rent, took on extra consulting hours, helped him update his portfolio, rewrite descriptions, even reached out to a few contacts I'd built over the years. I sat with him late at night while he refreshed his inbox, reminding him this wasn't a reflection of his worth. He used to look at me then, tired, grateful, and say, "You're my rock, Marlo." I believed that meant partnership. Looking back, I realize it mostly meant I was convenient. There were sacrifices I barely noticed at the time, like the weekend trip my friends had planned, hiking, cabins, getting away from screens and responsibilities for once. I canceled without a second thought when he got evicted from his old place and needed help moving. No big deal, I told myself as I carried boxes up narrow stairs. That's what you do when you love someone. We talked about the future in that vague, reassuring way. Marriage someday, maybe kids. Nothing rushed, nothing concrete, but enough to make it feel like we were aligned. I made it clear I wasn't dating casually. I was choosing him. He always said he appreciated my stability. At the time, I took that as a compliment. Now I understand what he really meant. Stability, to him, wasn't something mutual. It wasn't something you protect. It was something you lean on. Something you assume will always be there, no matter how little you give back. There were moments, small ones, where something felt off. Times when I noticed I was always adjusting my schedule, my expectations, even my tone to keep things smooth. I was the one absorbing stress so the relationship didn't crack. I told myself love was patience. That commitment meant tolerating discomfort. I didn't realize yet that I was slowly teaching someone how to take me for granted. At the time, I thought I was being mature, supportive, the kind of woman people said men were lucky to have. I didn't know I was already being placed in the role of safe. Not chosen, just relied on. I should have paid closer attention to the way his phone lit up. Not because he hid it, not because he turned the screen away, but because of how his face changed when he saw her name. It was subtle, just a flicker, a lift in his expression, a quick smile he didn't even realize he was making. At first, I told myself I was imagining it, that I was projecting insecurities onto something harmless. "She's just a friend," he said easily the first time I asked. Her name was Claire. They'd known each other since college. Same program, same late nights, same inside jokes that made no sense to anyone else. He said she'd been there through everything, bad jobs, worse breakups, all the messy years before adulthood settled in. "She's like family," he added, like that should settle it. I wanted to be the kind of woman who didn't flinch at that, the kind who trusted without keeping score, so I nodded. Let it go. At least I thought I did. Claire started appearing everywhere. Coffee runs that turned into hours. Quick catch-ups that somehow always happened when I was working late. Photos on social media. Him and Claire at art shows, street fairs, late-night diners. Always smiling, always close. The captions never mentioned me. At first, I brushed it off. I wasn't the type to police someone's friendships. I told myself that confidence meant not needing reassurance every 5 minutes. But then the comparisons started. Not outright, not cruelly, just casually. "Claire's so spontaneous," he said once, laughing. "She texted me at midnight and dragged me to this pop-up show. You'd hate it. Way too loud for you." Another time, "She's great at working a room, knows how to talk to anyone. You're more reserved." Reserved. It wasn't an insult, but it wasn't a compliment either. I noticed how often he brought her up, how naturally her name slipped into conversations that had nothing to do with her, how he'd light up recounting stories about her, then go quiet when I talked about my day. When I tried to explain how it made me feel, he sighed like I was asking for something unreasonable. You're being paranoid, he said. There's nothing there. Claire's just easier in social settings. You know how you are. I swallowed that sentence whole, because I did know how I was. Thoughtful, observant, not the loudest person in the room. I'd always believed those things were strengths, until I started seeing them framed as shortcomings. The worst part wasn't even the time they spent together. It was how small I felt standing next to her shadow. I was the one paying half the rent, the one holding things together, the one who stayed. But somehow she was the one who got his excitement, his stories, his attention. Late at night, lying beside him while he scrolled on his phone, I'd catch myself wondering when I'd stopped being the woman he was eager to talk to. I didn't accuse, I didn't demand, I didn't draw lines. I told myself love meant trust. I told myself I was overthinking. What I didn't realize was that every time I ignored that tight feeling in my chest, I was teaching him something dangerous. That my discomfort was negotiable. That my place beside him wasn't guaranteed. And that would matter more than I knew. It didn't happen all at once. That's the thing about being diminished. You rarely notice the exact moment it starts. There's no announcement, no warning sign. Just a slow shift, like furniture being moved an inch at a time until one day you trip over it. The comparisons became part of the background noise of our relationship. At first, they were framed as observations, harmless, almost thoughtful. Claire's really good at reading people, he said once after a dinner party. She knows exactly what to say to keep things fun. I smiled, nodded, told myself it wasn't personal. Another night, scrolling through photos on his phone, he paused on one of her, laughing, hair slightly messy, caught mid-motion. She just has this energy, he said. You know? I knew. What he didn't say filled in the gaps. You don't. It wasn't that he ever directly criticized me. That would have been easier to push back against. Instead, he praised her in ways that quietly reframed me as the opposite. She was spontaneous. I was predictable. She was magnetic. I was steady. She could light up a room. I kept things grounded. Those words sound neutral on their own. Balanced, even. But when you hear them often enough, always in contrast, they start to feel like measurements. Like you're being weighed against someone else and coming up just short. I caught myself adjusting, laughing louder at gatherings, forcing enthusiasm when I was tired, letting him choose plans, restaurants, even music, because it seemed easier than being labeled low energy. Once, after I declined a last-minute invitation to go out, early meeting the next morning, he shrugged and said, almost jokingly, Claire would have been down. He didn't look at me when he said it. I laughed it off. Later that night, alone in the bathroom brushing my teeth, I stared at my reflection and wondered when being responsible had started feeling like a flaw. I started editing myself in conversations, cutting stories short, second-guessing whether what I had to say was interesting enough. I'd listen to him talk about his day, his frustrations, his ideas, his dreams, with full attention, nodding, encouraging. But when it was my turn, his focus drifted. Phone in hand, half smiles. Uh-huh. I told myself not to keep score. That love wasn't transactional. But something inside me was slowly eroding. There were moments, quiet ones, when I thought about saying something real. About asking him why I always felt like I was competing with a woman who wasn't even supposed to be in the race. But every time I opened my mouth, I remembered how easily he dismissed my concerns before. You're overthinking. You're too sensitive. Why are you making this a thing? So I stayed silent. Because silence felt safer than being told my feelings were the problem. I didn't realize then that I was disappearing in increments, that by the time the real betrayal came, I'd already been conditioned to doubt myself. I still believed we were building something together. I didn't know I was already being sidelined. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday. Cream cardstock, gold lettering. My boyfriend's cousin's name embossed at the top like the event itself was important enough to demand respect before you even opened the envelope. He was excited in a way I hadn't seen in a while. Big family thing, he said, already pulling it apart. Outdoor ceremony, nice venue, everyone's going to be there. Everyone. That word landed heavier than it should have. I smiled anyway. Asked questions. Dates. Location. What he thought he might wear. I even felt a flicker of something like hope. This was family. Public. A milestone moment. The kind of place where couples stand together without question. I wanted to believe that. Over the next few weeks, the wedding became a recurring topic. He talked about it at dinner, mentioned it in passing texts, joked about how his relatives loved a good party. I prepared the way I always did, quietly, thoroughly. I booked time off work, found a dress that felt elegant but not showy, bought a thoughtful gift for the couple, and wrote a card that sounded warm without trying too hard. I even practiced a few dance steps alone in the living room one night because I knew he liked to dance, and I didn't want to be the reason he held back. It felt ridiculous and earnest at the same time. As the date got closer, though, something shifted. He started snapping at small things. "Don't wear that," he said once when I showed him an option for the ceremony. "It's a little stiff." Another time, when I suggested we coordinate colors, he waved it off. "It's not that serious." I told myself he was stressed. Family events did that to people. Then he mentioned her. "Claire's coming too," he said casually, like it was an afterthought. "She's friends with my cousin's wife. They've known each other forever." Of course she was. I kept my expression neutral, asked nothing, said nothing. Inside, something tightened. The week of the wedding, he was glued to his phone, laughing at messages he didn't share, typing quickly, then locking the screen when I walked by. Once I caught a glimpse of a notification. Her name, followed by a laughing emoji. I looked away. The morning of the wedding, we got ready together. Steam from the shower fogged the mirror. Music played softly from his phone. He seemed lighter than he had in months, energized, like the day held something he was eager to step into. I watched him adjust his jacket in the mirror and wondered, briefly, if I was imagining the distance between us. At the venue, the ceremony was beautiful. Rows of white chairs under open sky, string lights waiting for dusk, families greeting each other with practiced smiles. He held my hand, introduced me proudly, kissed my cheek when the vows were exchanged. For a moment, I let myself relax. Maybe I'd been wrong. Maybe this was just my insecurity talking. Then, during cocktail hour, he pulled me aside. Not urgently, not apologetically, just deliberately. His tone changed, lower, controlled, like he was about to give instructions, not start a conversation. "Listen," he said, glancing around to make sure no one was close enough to hear. "Don't embarrass me tonight, okay?" I blinked. "What do you mean?" I asked. "I'm just here to support you." He exhaled through his nose, faintly annoyed. "You know what I mean," he said. "This is a big deal for my family. Claire's great at mingling. She knows how to charm people. Just try to blend in." Something in my chest dropped. He kept going. "Your work stories are kind of boring for this crowd," he added. "IT stuff doesn't exactly light up a party. Claire has these funny stories. People love her. Just don't dominate conversations. Let her take the lead." The words didn't register all at once. They stacked, each one pressing harder than the last. I nodded because I didn't know what else to do. Because we were standing in the middle of a wedding. Because people were watching. Because I was used to swallowing discomfort for the sake of peace. I told myself it was just one night. I didn't know yet that this night was about to show me exactly where I stood. The reception hall glowed the way wedding venues always do. Warm lights, polished wood floors, glasses clinking softly as people found their seats. There was laughter everywhere, overlapping conversations, the hum of celebration rising and falling like music under everything else. Our table assignment was near the dance floor, prime seating. His parents, his siblings, a few aunts and uncles, the kind of table that said, "This is family, this is important, this is where you belong." I took that as a quiet reassurance. I was mid-conversation with his mother, complimenting the ceremony, asking about a relative I'd met once, when I felt him touch my arm, not gently, not affectionately, urgently. "Marl," he stopped himself, lowered his voice. "Come here." I excused myself and followed him a few steps away. Claire was standing there. She looked effortless, hair perfectly undone, dress that somehow looked both casual and intentional. She smiled at me like we were on the same team. He didn't waste time. "There's been a little mix-up with the seating," he said, already sounding impatient, like he wanted this resolved quickly. "Claire got stuck at one of the back tables." I waited. Surely there was more. "She fits better here," he continued. "My family loves her. It'll be more fun if she's at this table." The words didn't land right away. I looked at him, then at Claire, then back at him. "What are you saying?" I asked carefully. He frowned, like I was slowing things down. "I'm asking if you can switch seats with her," he said. "Just for dinner. It's not a big deal." The room felt suddenly louder, brighter, too much. "That's our table," I said quietly. "I'm your girlfriend." He sighed, rubbing his forehead like I was being difficult. "Come on, don't make this a thing," he said. "Claire's more outgoing. She'll keep the conversation lively. You're more introverted." Introverted. Again. "She's also been through a rough breakup," he added quickly, like that sealed it. "She could use the family vibe. You'll be fine at the other table." I glanced back at the table. His mother had noticed the delay. His aunt was watching us with polite curiosity. People would notice if I left. Claire didn't say a word. She just stood there, hands folded, faint smile in place, waiting. Why does she need my seat? I asked. My voice stayed calm, even though something inside me was cracking. Why does she belong here more than I do? He crossed his arms. Because she fits, he said. It's one night. Stop being selfish. Selfish. At a wedding. For not wanting to be replaced. This is my cousin's wedding, he pressed. It's about family. Claire's practically family. You'll survive a couple of hours alone. I felt heat rise behind my eyes, not tears, just pressure. I looked at him, really looked. At how certain he was, at how easily he'd decided, at how little my presence mattered once it conflicted with his comfort. Claire met my eyes then, just for a second. There was no apology there, no embarrassment, just expectation. I understood everything in that moment. If I stayed, I'd be accepting the role he'd already given me. The backup, the placeholder, the woman who made things stable while someone else made things exciting. I straightened my shoulders. If that's how you feel, I said evenly, then enjoy the night. He blinked. Wait. I didn't wait. I turned and walked away, weaving through tables, past guests who didn't know they were witnessing the end of something. I didn't cry. I didn't rush. I just left. By the time I reached the parking lot, my phone was already vibrating. Over and over. I didn't listen to the voicemails yet. I got in my car, closed the door, and sat there in silence for a moment before starting the engine. As I pulled away, one thought settled with surprising clarity. I wasn't walking away from love. I was walking away from humiliation. I didn't turn the radio on. The silence felt more honest. Streetlights streaked past the windshield as I drove, my hands steady on the wheel, even though my chest felt hollow. I kept waiting for some dramatic surge of emotion, anger, tears, regret, but none of it came. Just a dull, aching clarity that settled deeper with every mile. My phone buzzed again, and again. I glanced at the screen once at a red light. 6 missed calls, 6 voicemails. I didn't open them. I already knew the pattern. At first, there would be confusion. Where are you? Then irritation. You're being dramatic. Then panic. Please call me. And finally, desperation dressed up as concern. I'd lived that cycle before in smaller ways. This was just the loudest version of it. The drive felt endless. An hour stretched thin by replayed moments I couldn't unsee. The way his eyes slid past me to Claire, the ease with which he'd decided I was movable, optional. By the time I pulled into our apartment's parking lot, my phone was lighting up like a warning signal. I didn't go inside. I sat there with the engine running and finally listened. The first voicemail was annoyed. Marlo, what the hell? You just left. I didn't mean it like that. Claire's just better at social stuff. Call me back. The second was sharper. Okay, be mad, but you're ruining the night. My family's asking where you went. This is embarrassing. The third softened, just a little. I get that you're upset, but it's not a big deal. She's sitting there now. It's whatever. Just talk to me. The fourth cracked. Music thumped faintly in the background. I'm sorry if it came out wrong. You know I love you. Don't do this. Come back. Or at least pick up. By the fifth, his voice was unsteady. Why are you ignoring me? This hurts. I didn't think you'd overreact like this. The sixth was different, breathing uneven. What if you got in an accident? Please call me. I messed up. I need to know you're okay. I stared straight ahead as the last message ended. Something strange happened then. I didn't feel comforted. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt detached. Because listening to them back to back, I heard the truth clearly for the first time. None of it was about me. Not really. It was about the night falling apart, the questions his family was asking, the image cracking in public. There was no acknowledgement of what he'd done, no recognition of how deeply he'd humiliated me, just fear of consequences, of inconvenience, of losing control. I deleted all 6 voicemails. Then I turned my phone off. I grabbed an overnight bag from the back seat, something I'd started keeping there months ago for work trips, and drove to the nearest motel. Nothing fancy, just clean, quiet, anonymous. That night, I lay on unfamiliar sheets staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of an air conditioner that didn't know me, didn't expect anything from me. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something close to peace. Not relief, not happiness. Just the absence of being weighed down. I fell asleep knowing one thing with absolute certainty. I wasn't going back to that table. I woke up before my alarm. The motel room was washed in that dull gray light that exists just before morning, decides what kind of day it's going to be. For a moment, I didn't know where I was. Then it came back all at once. The wedding, the table, the walk to my car. The silence. My phone was still off. I left it that way while I showered, dressed, packed the bag I hadn't fully unpacked. The woman in the mirror looked the same, but something in her posture had shifted. Straighter. Less apologetic. I turned my phone on in the parking lot. Notifications flooded in immediately. Text first. Marlo, where did you go last night? You seriously need to answer me. This is blown way out of proportion. Can we please talk like adults? I didn't reply. There were emails, too. Long ones. Rambling. Equal parts apology and justification. He was stressed. He didn't mean it that way. Claire misunderstood. I misunderstood. Everything was a misunderstanding. It struck me then how much energy he was putting into explaining himself, without ever actually owning what he'd done. I drove home mid-morning, parked a block away, and went up to the apartment while he was still out. The place smelled the same. Familiar. Too familiar. I packed quietly. Clothes first. Laptop. Important documents. Things that were unquestionably mine. I didn't touch anything shared. I didn't leave a note. There was nothing left to explain. By the time I was done, my phone rang again. This time it wasn't him. It was his mother. I hesitated before answering, then picked up. Part of me still expected decency. Marlo, she said sharply, skipping any pretense. This whole situation is ridiculous. I stayed calm. What situation? The wedding, she snapped. You walking out like that? Do you have any idea how that looked? There it was. I do, I said evenly. That's why I left. She exhaled, irritated. He told me what happened. Switching seats is nothing to end a relationship over. You're being dramatic. I was asked to give up my place so another woman could sit with his family, I replied. That wasn't nothing to me, she scoffed. Claire's been around forever. She's practically family. You're letting jealousy ruin something good. Something inside me went still. With all due respect, I said, your son made his priorities clear. I'm respecting them. There was a pause on the line, then her voice hardened. So you're just throwing away 2 years? No, I said. I'm stepping away from being disrespected. I hung up before she could respond. That was the moment I understood what silence really was. It wasn't avoidance. It wasn't weakness. It was a boundary. Over the next few days, I moved the rest of my things out while he was at work, rented a small storage unit, changed passwords, redirected mail, detached myself piece by piece from a life that no longer fit. I didn't post about it, didn't vent, didn't explain. I went to the gym for the first time in months, pushed my body until my thoughts quieted, let sweat burn off the guilt I didn't need to carry anymore. And slowly, the fog lifted. I wasn't heartbroken. I was clear. The truth didn't arrive all at once. It never does. At first, it came in fragments, half-heard updates, careful messages from people who weren't sure what side they were supposed to be on, friends who'd noticed my absence and were quietly trying to understand why. I didn't ask questions. I didn't dig. But information has a way of finding you when you stop chasing it. A week after the wedding, a mutual friend texted me something neutral on the surface. Hey, just checking in. Hope you're okay. I replied with a simple, I am. Thanks. Then a pause. Things at the wedding got weird after you left. That was the first crack. Apparently, once I was gone, the night didn't smooth over the way he'd expected. Claire took my seat, just like he'd planned. She laughed loudly, told stories, kept the table entertained. But something shifted. People noticed the switch. His mother asked, casually, then not so casually, why I'd moved tables. An aunt mentioned it felt odd. A cousin joked about musical chairs, and the joke didn't land. Claire, emboldened, grew handsy on the dance floor. Too familiar, too comfortable. Someone pulled him aside and raised an eyebrow. Another relative whispered to his mother. And the question started. The photos he posted that night told their own story. Him and Claire dancing, him and Claire laughing. The caption read something like, best night ever. Family vibes. I saw it later, not because I was looking, but because someone sent me a screenshot with a single line underneath. This doesn't look great. A few days after that, the real fallout began. They fought. Not quietly, not politely. Claire hadn't just been enjoying the wedding, she'd been networking, slipping business cards to his relatives, using the family event to pitch herself, to make connections, to elevate herself. When he confronted her, she didn't apologize. She laughed, called him uptight, said he was overreacting, said he'd invited this dynamic by always choosing her over me, by making space for her in places she didn't belong. That argument escalated fast. Texts were sent, lines were crossed, words that couldn't be taken back. Someone leaked screenshots. I never saw them myself, but I heard enough. You're fun in public, but exhausting in private. Stick with your safe girlfriend if that's what you want. Don't confuse attention with commitment. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. He spiraled, missed work, snapped at colleagues, blew deadlines. The creative confidence he'd once worn so easily cracked under pressure. His boss noticed. So did his family. His mother stopped calling me. His cousin unfollowed him online. Friends distanced themselves, not dramatically, just enough to hurt. Claire vanished from his life as quickly as she'd dominated it. New photos surfaced days later. Different group, different event, same smile, same pattern. I watched none of it directly, but every update confirmed what I already knew. This wasn't about me leaving. This was about a system finally collapsing without someone holding it together. Meanwhile, my life didn't explode. It simplified. I settled into a routine that belonged to me. Gym in the mornings. Work that challenged me without draining me. Evenings that were quiet in a way that felt intentional, not lonely. The ache faded. Not because I forgot what happened, but because I stopped questioning myself. Karma didn't arrive with fireworks. It arrived with clarity. And that was enough. Silence didn't scare him at first. He mistook it for a pause, a cooling off period, something temporary. That's what people like him always assume, that the person who has been patient the longest will eventually return to restore balance. He was wrong. About 10 days after the wedding, my phone rang from an unfamiliar number. I let it go to voicemail. Curiosity got the better of me later, and I listened. "Marlo, it's me," his voice said, trying to sound calm, reasonable. "I know you're mad, but this has gone far enough. The seating thing was stupid, okay? I was stressed. Claire's just a friend. She means nothing. You overreacted by leaving like that. Call me back so we can fix this." Fix this? As if what happened was a technical glitch. I deleted the voicemail. That's when the intermediaries appeared. A message from one of his friends, someone I'd shared dinners with, laughed with. "He's not doing great. He knows he messed up. Don't throw away something good over one bad night." Then his brother. "Family's upset, yeah, but you disappearing made it worse. He needs you. At least talk." Needs. That word again. A week later, his mother tried from a different number. Softer this time. Measured. "You don't have to punish him forever," she said. "He's learned his lesson." I almost laughed. Because what he'd learned wasn't respect. It was loss of control. The real shift came the night he showed up at my apartment. I wasn't expecting it. I was cooking dinner, music low, phone face down on the counter. Then there was knocking. Sharp, urgent, unmistakable. "Marlo," his voice came through the door. "I know you're in there." I didn't move. "I messed up," he said, the words tumbling out now. "Claire's gone. She used me. She said things, really messed up things. You were right about her. I see that now." Silence on my end. "We can go back to how things were," he pleaded. "I'll fix it, I promise." How things were. Me swallowing discomfort. Me being moved aside. Me staying quiet so he could stay comfortable. I stayed exactly where I was, listening as his voice shifted, from pleading to frustrated, from apologetic to angry. "You're really just going to ignore me?" he snapped finally. "After everything I've been through? After everything I chose you over?" The audacity was almost impressive. When he left, it wasn't with an apology. It was with resentment. That's when I knew, really knew, that if I had stayed, this would have been my life. Cycles of justification, temporary remorse, and permanent disrespect. 2 months later, I saw him again. A mutual friend's birthday. Small bar. Low lights. I'd debated skipping it, but my life had grown larger than my fear of running into him. I didn't arrive alone. I was with Rowan, someone I'd met through a hiking group. Calm, attentive, kind in ways that didn't demand repayment. We weren't rushing anything, just building, slowly, equally. When my ex saw me, his face changed. Shock first, then regret, then something darker. He cornered me near the bar. "Marlo, please," he said, eyes darting to Rowan. "Can we talk?" "There's nothing to talk about," I replied calmly. He looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time, not as something stable to lean on, but as someone who had moved on without him. "But I love you," he said desperately. "Doesn't that count for anything?" I met his eyes, steady. "It means you learned something," I said. "It just didn't come in time to keep me." I turned away, and that was the last conversation we ever had. I didn't think about him after that. Not in the dramatic way people expect. No late-night spirals, no imaginary arguments in the shower. He simply stopped occupying space in my mind, like furniture that had been quietly removed while I wasn't looking. Life has a way of filling the gaps when you let it. Work picked up in a good way. A project I'd poured myself into finally paid off, and with it came a promotion, more responsibility, more trust, more money. Not because I'd sacrificed myself for it, but because I was actually present again, focused, energized. I kept going to the gym, not to punish my body, not to prove anything, just because it felt good to be strong, to feel capable in a way that belonged only to me. Daniel stayed. No pressure, no grand gestures, just consistency. He listened when I talked, asked questions, remembered details. When I told him about my job, he didn't glaze over or joke about it being boring. He wanted to understand, not because it entertained him, but because it mattered to me. That difference was everything. Months later, I heard updates the way you hear weather reports from a city you no longer live in. My ex had switched jobs, something entry-level, unstable. His family kept their distance after the full story circulated. Claire had moved on to someone else, somewhere else, repeating the same pattern with a new audience. There was no satisfaction in that knowledge, just confirmation. The wedding, the humiliation, the walk to my car, the voicemails, it all felt distant. Like a past version of myself, I could finally see clearly. I understood something then that I wish I'd known earlier. People don't reveal who they are when they're angry. They reveal who they are when they think they can get away with it. That night, he hadn't chosen Claire. He'd chosen himself. And in doing so, he'd shown me exactly where I stood. Walking away wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It didn't require revenge. It required self-respect. I didn't lose a relationship that night. I lost the illusion that being patient, loyal, and accommodating would eventually earn me the same in return. And what I gained instead was a life that finally fit.